What if there were zombie runners in The Walking Dead? I know in the spin-offs, we've been introduced to runners, however those are typically man-made, and for this what if, I want them to be in the beginning. So how can this be achieved? In the world beyond, we learned runners were accidentally created by scientists, experimenting with cardiac plaques to prevent reanimation. Their goal was to stop the virus by disrupting the brain, but instead they created a faster, more aggressive variant that reanimated in under a minute. Now imagine if Dr. Jenner from the CDC, who at this time was in contact with Violet Team, attempted to replicate their experiments, and in doing so created the same runners. But how do these runners get out? I really don't have a good answer, so let's just say the system and the CDC malfunction and open the doors, allowing the runners to escape into the world. Since the US is huge, it would take time for these runners to become widespread. But how many would there be? The numbers are iffy and I can only give you my best estimate. Some sources say in the beginning of The Walking Dead there were roughly 5,000 walkers to one human, meaning during this time around 1.4 million people were alive. But how many of those would be in the US? Using the same logic, there would be roughly around 62,000 people. But that's not right. The CRM alone had 200,000 people, and with their alliance, the numbers would be close to 400,000 people, and if we included the Commonwealth, there would be 450,000 people. So to make this manageable, let's just say for every 1,000 walker, there is one runner. That would put their number somewhere around 300,000 runners, and this is not including all the runners killed, but for the sake of this video, that'll be the number in the US. How would this change the world? Well, early on, these runners would devastate smaller, scattered survivor groups. Established communities like the Woodbury would adapt more easily, while nomadic survivors would suffer heavy losses. Runners wouldn't just be a new threat, they change how people survive. Scavenging, traveling, hunting, and even defending small camps would become far more dangerous. Even though the introduction of runners changes the game for your average Joe, we have seen survivors capable of taking out runners in small numbers. Runners would surely change the rules, but based on how many there are, I don't think much changes apart from fewer people and making zombies more of a threat. However, something to consider is the possibility of a runner horde forming. While the chances of this happening are low, they aren't zero, and more than likely the hordes would be small in size. Since these runners are smart, I can see smaller communities like Woodbury or the hospital group getting overwhelmed by these hordes. So how would this change the story for our main characters? I'm going to change the story and add runners. This is how I believe things would turn out. Let's say everything happens mostly the same at first. Rick finds his family, they survive the camp attack, and head out to the CDC. But this time when they arrive, the CDC is abandoned and partially overrun. They narrowly escape and head toward Fort Benning. Meanwhile, the Living, the group that Randall belonged to, well, these guys got ambushed and wiped out by the runners. These guys didn't seem to have an established settlement and moved about, making them easy pickings for these variants. They had somewhere between 30 survivors. Keeping that in mind, we now have a small but very lethal runner horde. A few things can happen now on their way to Fort Benning. They can either come across Woodbury or the prison. Woodbury is literally in front of Fort Benning and the prison is near. So let's say when they neared Woodbury, they encountered some of the governor's soldiers and witnessed a massacre. They decided to avoid this path and chose to go around where they encountered a prison. They cleared the prison and decided to make it their home. However, the governor's men had seen them and sent a scout to follow them. This time, because of Shane, the survivors in the prison get taken out rather quickly. All seems fine until the governor arrives with a large convoy of soldiers. Thinking our survivors are weak, he launches a preemptive attack on the prison. However, unbeknownst to him, on their way there, the horde of runners catch wind of them. Let's say the horde made it to the farm and took out the Green family, adding ranks to their numbers. The assault begins similarly to how it did when the governor first attacked the prison. Things are different this time. One, our group is the one that arrived at the CDC. Second, Daryl is in the prison during the attack and Merle is still with the governor, since he doesn't know who this group is. Third, the governor is attacking with the intent of taking over the prison rather than making a statement, like he did in the first battle. Fourth, there is no Michonne. And lastly, the governor has about 10 to 15 soldiers with him, since he gained a larger army after he attacked the prison. Bang! Jackie gets shot on the head, and shots begin to flurry all around. Rick, Shane, Daryl, and Glenn are the first to respond and begin shooting, giving cover fire for T-Dog, Andrea, and Dal to get the others to safety. However, one of the Woodbury soldiers has made it to the watchtower and takes down Dal, pressing everybody else. Rick and Shane both manage to take down a soldier each before a van breaks through their first fence. Merle leads the vanguard, taking out T-Dog. However, he quickly realizes his brother is amongst amongst the enemy. Seeing the soldier at the guard tower having Daryl pinned, he takes him out. Before the other soldiers have a chance to kill Merle, Andrea and Daryl take out a few soldiers, allowing a reprieve for Merle to take cover. Rick and Shane position themselves to prepare for a second assault led by the governor. Andrea and Daryl are harmed for exposing themselves to save Merle, but as the governor advances, a foul stench comes from behind. As the soldiers turn around, it's too late, and the runner horde takes him from the rear. The first of the dead are taken out quickly, but soon half the Woodbury soldiers are taken out, and in a last-ditch effort, the governor presses forward. However, Rick and Shane counterattack, shooting and injuring the governor. The few remaining soldiers are then taken out. The rest of the survivors secure themselves behind the second gate. However, before the gate is closed, a runner pounces on Andrea and takes her out. The rest begin a relentless attack against the dead. They manage to close the gate before any get in, but the dead begin to climb. Lori and Carol come out to assist, and with Merle, Daryl, Glenn, Shane, and Rick, they manage to kill all the runners before they get in. However, the governor had survived and made it to the van, and in his final act of war, he drives the van, tearing down their gate, and finally succumbs to his wounds and dies. Distracted by the governor's last-ditch effort, the survivors never realized the soldiers in Andrea had already turned and had already rushed in the prison courtyard. The first to go down is Glenn, as two runners take him out, the next, Lori. The remaining survivors quickly push back into the prison. Eventually, they would find a way to kill the runners outside and seal the gate with the aid of Michonne, who had initially seen the horde running towards the prison. In time, the prison and Woodbury would eventually meet and join as a group or as an alliance. I know in some areas I went out of my way to change things up, but I wanted to make it interesting. Maybe things would turn out differently. Also, I want to clear things up. If all the walkers were suddenly runners, and I honestly don't think there would be a reason to even make this what if, because everybody would just be dead. I decided to go this route that would keep the story alive. But that is it for this video. Like, subscribe, or don't, as long as you enjoy the video.